Chapter 9. Bravo! George gasped. You know what happened to the slippers? She demanded. What? Who? Where? How? Why? I think Gregory is the person who should be answering those questions, Nancy said. Nancy marched up to Gregory and Scruffy, with George and Bess at her heels. Gregory stopped and turned around. Scruffy gave a short bark. Nancy put her hands on her hips and stared sternly at Gregory. She felt a little silly doing that in her mouse costume, but this was important. You took the Cinderella slippers, didn't you? Nancy accused Gregory. Gregory's cheeks turned bright red. No way, he stammered. I don't know what you are talking about. Beth stepped up. She put her hands on her hips too. You do know, she said. And you'd better tell us. Gregory stared at the floor. Scruffy barked at him. I think you took the Cinderella slippers on Tuesday as a joke, Nancy guessed. You hid them somewhere, maybe in the set storage area. Then you forgot where you hid them, or someone moved them. Either way, now you don't know where they are. You've been looking for them since Wednesday, using Scruffy's super duper doggy nose. Beth seemed to pick up on Nancy's thoughts. You let Scruffy smell the rhinestone and the piece of paper with the size on it to help track down the slippers, she said slowly. Gregory looked up and stared at her, his eyes wide. How did you guys know all that? He asked her. That's why we are the clue crew, Georgie said with a grin. Oh, Gregory frowned. I didn't mean to steal the slippers, exactly, he confessed finally. I was just going to hide them as a joke, like Nancy said. I did it after rehearsal on Tuesday. Is that the last time you saw them? Nancy asked him. Gregory nodded. On Wednesday, when Andrea and everybody else figured out the slippers were missing, they all freaked out. I thought that was kind of funny. Then I went over to the hiding place to get them, but they were gone. Where did you get the rhinestone? Bess said. It fell off on Wednesday. It fell off on Tuesday when I hid the slippers, Gregory replied. I was going to glue it on later. I let Scruffy smell it so he'd help me find the slippers. He has an awesome sense of smell. I think his great-grandfather was a bloodhound. Then something else occurred to Nancy. That's why there was a magnifying glass in your dance bag, she said suddenly. Yeah, I was trying to act like a real detective, so I'd solve the mystery, Gregory admitted. I guess it didn't work. The slippers are still gone. Mr. McGuire is going to be super mad at me. He sighed unhappily. Nancy thought for a moment. Where did you hide the slippers on Tuesday? She asked him. In a giant ice cream sundae, Gregory replied. A giant ice cream sundae? Nancy, George, and Beth repeated in unison. Gregory nodded. Yeah, it was made of painted wood. It had a little shelf on the back part of it. I put the slippers there, but then the whole thing disappeared. Like, how did that happen? Nancy gasped. It all made sense now. I know where the sundae is, she exclaimed. You do? Gregory asked her eagerly. Where? I'll give you my magnifying glass if you find the sundae, he offered. You can keep your magnifying glass, Nancy told him. Come on, guys, we have to get up to the attic. The attic? Beth said, sounding confused. The giant ice cream sundae is from the Nutcracker, Nancy said, heading for the stairs. Beth, George, and Gregory followed Nancy. The four of them raced up the stairs to the attic. Scruffy bounded behind them. Nancy had never been in the attic before. It was a big room with a ceiling that sloped down on either side, following the lines of the roof. It was full of set pieces and props, giant trees, the fronts of buildings, fake lamp posts, Victorian furniture. Everything was covered with a fine layer of dust. Scruffy sneezed. So did Bess and George. Okay, what's this about the Nutcracker? Georgie asked Nancy as she sneezed again. Miss Zelda told me that she moved some old set pieces from the Nutcracker from the studio up to the attic to make room. Nancy explained breathlessly. This was Tuesday night. Tuesday night? Gregory cried out. That night, that's right after I hit the sleepers. Nancy nodded. Exactly. Now we just have to find the giant ice cream sundae somehow. There's an awful lot of stuff here, and we can't mess up our costume, or Mr. McGuire really be mad, George pointed out. And we don't have a lot of time, Bess said. But it took Nancy and her colloquer only a few minutes to find the giant ice cream sundae. It had been shoved in between a huge cookie and an enormous piece of pie. Nancy peered behind the sundae. She saw the shelf Gregory had mentioned. Actually, it was more like a little nook. The Cinderella slippers were there. Nancy pulled them out and held them in the air. Held them up in the air. Yay, we found them, she exclaimed. The crew does it again, Georgie said with a grin. Nancy stood behind the blue velvet curtain. She peered through a crack between two curtain panels. Oh, I see Dad and Hannah, she said excitedly. They're sitting in the front row. I see my parents, Beth said. I see mine too, Georgie added. It was opening night. The curtain would go up in a few minutes. Backstage, everyone was buzzing with excitement. Miss Zelda hurried around, making sure everyone's costumes were on just right. Mr. McGuire rushed here and there, checking that the lights and the sound equipment were working properly. Andrea came up to Nancy and her friends. She was dressed in her Act One Cinderella clothes, a simple gray dress, black tights, and black ballet slippers. In Act Two, she would be transformed into a beautiful princess with her long pink ball gown and, of course, her special Cinderella slippers. Andrea gave each of the three girls a big hug. I don't know how to thank you guys, she said happily. You really are the most awesome detectives in the world. I'm just glad we found your slippers in time for opening night, Nancy said. Gregory apologized to me and Mr. McGuire, Andrea said. He brought us both homemade cookies from his mom, too. They were real this time. She giggled. That's good. Nancy giggled, too. Places, everybody, Mr. McGuire announced in a loud whisper. Curtain in 2 minutes. Oh my gosh, Bess exclaimed. Nancy and her friends ran to their places. Nancy's heart was pounding so hard that she thought it would burst out of her chest. It was opening night, and she was in the show. She was not just a real detective, but a real ballerina too. The lights in the theater dimmed. The music began to play. The blue velvet curtain closed after the final act. Applause rang out in the auditorium. Behind the curtain, the dancers rushed around, looking for their places to take a bow. Nancy bumped into George. Ow, sorry, Nancy giggled. Wasn't that awesome? George said breathlessly. Beth ran up to them. That was so much fun, she said. I think we should all be dancers when we grow up. Dancer detectives, Georgie said, nodding. We'll solve mysteries during the day and dance on stage at night. Mr. McGuire stepped out from one of the stage wings. His usually serious looking face was glowing with excitement. Places, everyone, he said in a loud whisper. It's time to take your bows. I can't believe it's over, Bess gasped. Nancy took her place. So did George, Bess, and the other dancers. After a few seconds, the curtain switched open. Nancy was dazzled. Her eyes took a minute to focus because the stage lights were so bright and the auditorium was dark. Everyone was clapping like mad. Nancy tried to make out her father and Hannah in the audience. She finally spotted them. Her father was holding a bouquet of flowers and a big stuffed teddy bear. They were for Nancy. Then Mr. Drew and the whole audience stood up. This was a standing ovation, which meant that the people really liked the ballet. Nancy took her bow along with the other dancers. After a moment, Andrea swept out from the wing of the stage and took a special bow, since she was Cinderella. The crowd clapped even more loudly. Andreas looked so pretty. Her Cinderella slippers glittered brightly under the stage lights. The curtain closed, then opened again. The audience just kept clapping. Nancy turned to look at George and Beth and grinned. They grinned back. The Clue Crew had done it again.